The baby looked nothing like my daughter, but he looked exactly like my husband. That's the thought that knocked the wind out of me. I remember it like it happened this morning. I had just picked up the tiny blue blanket off the floor, folded it neatly, and was reaching to hand it back when the baby turned. Round face, brown eyes, and a little cleft in his chin I'd kissed 1,000 times. On someone else's face, my husband's. Just 3 hours earlier, I'd been in my kitchen, humming to myself and stirring chicken noodle soup on the stove. It was a regular Thursday. The window was cracked, letting in that soft spring air, the kind that carries the smell of blooming azaleas and wet earth. My housecoat sleeves were rolled up. I just put on a fresh pot of coffee, and the biggest decision I had made all morning was whether to use the angel pasta or the fat egg noodles. Then my phone rang. It was my daughter, Simone. "Hey, Mama," she said, rushed but cheerful. "Any chance you're free this afternoon?" I smiled. "What's going on, baby?" "Emergency at work. My friend Mia's stuck, and she can't watch the baby like we planned. Could you help? Just for a couple hours? It's a huge favor." "Of course," I said without hesitation. "You know I'll always make time for my babies." Simone laughed. "Thank you, Mama. Seriously. You're a lifesaver." Simone was my only child. Well, at least I thought she was. We'd always been close, ever since her daddy passed when she was just 10. It was the two of us against the world back then. I'd worked nights at the hospital and spent my days baking boxed cake for school fundraisers and sewing buttons back onto school uniforms. When she met Derek, her now husband, I was cautious. Not because I didn't like him. He was handsome, charming, and said all the right things. He always brought flowers, always called me ma'am, always made sure Simone's gas tank was full when she was pregnant with their first. But I knew charm didn't mean character. And as much as I smiled and hugged and said, "Welcome to the family," I kept one eye open. The years went by. Simone and Derek had 2 children together, sweet girls, ages 6 and 4. I was a proud grandmother, the kind who kept their drawings taped on the fridge and saved every Mother's Day card in a shoebox in the linen closet. When Simone told me her friend's baby needed care, I didn't think twice. I assumed it was one of those modern co-op mama arrangements, or maybe a coworker's last-minute need. I even tidied up the guest room and laid out some toys just in case. I was standing by the screen door when Simone pulled into the driveway. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back tight, like she hadn't had time to fix it. Her face was flushed. She wasn't wearing her usual earrings, and she didn't come inside. She stayed by the car, unbuckled the car seat, and carried the baby up the steps like she was delivering groceries, quick, efficient, head down. "Hey, Mama," she said, avoiding my eyes. "This is him." I looked down. A little boy, maybe 15, 16 months old, quiet, holding a teething ring, big brown eyes, a sleepy frown, and a soft baby afro just beginning to curl around his ears. She kissed him once on the forehead, whispered something I couldn't hear, and passed him into my arms like she couldn't do it fast enough. "I'll be back by 6, she said. "I've got my phone." Then she turned around and left. The silence was thick. I carried the boy inside, bouncing him gently, humming an old lullaby under my breath. He was calm, sweet, didn't fuss, didn't cry, just sucked on that ring and looked around like he'd been here before. I laid him down on a blanket in the den, turned on a quiet cartoon, let the soup simmer a little longer than I meant to, and I watched him. Not like a babysitter, like a woman trying to unsee what her heart already knew. Because here's the thing about motherhood. You don't just recognize your child, you recognize what your child ain't. And as I sat there watching that baby boy wiggle and giggle and look up at me with my husband's eyes, I started to realize something was terribly, terribly wrong. The baby fell asleep not long after Simone left. He curled up in a tight little comma on the couch, soft snores coming out of his nose, holding on to a tiny plush giraffe like it was his whole world. And as I sat beside him, studying every detail, the shape of his brow, the slope of his nose, the dimple that flashed when he smiled in his sleep. I started counting back in my mind, back to when Simone was pregnant with her youngest, back to the time Derek had to travel for a contract job for a few months, a job that never paid a dime, come to think of it, and back to a quiet morning when I made pancakes for everyone, and Derek came downstairs in a rush, phone in hand, saying he had to step out for a call. That was the morning Simone found a long brown hair on his jacket. Not her texture, not mine. She'd laughed it off then, but I didn't. The more I looked at the baby, the more I felt it in my bones. This wasn't a friend's child. This wasn't some casual babysitting favor. This child belonged to someone in my family. And the one thing I'd learned over 6 decades on this earth, babies don't lie. Grown folks lie, men lie, even daughters lie when they're trying to hold something together that's already falling apart. But babies, they don't know how to. And this one, he was speaking volumes with just his face. At 5:57 p.m., Simone pulled back into the driveway. I watched her through the lace curtain, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead for a beat too long, like she had to gather herself before coming back inside. I opened the door before she knocked. She looked surprised to see me standing there. "Hey," she said quietly. "How'd it goes?" "Fine," I said, keeping my voice even. "He's a sweet baby." She nodded, still not meeting my eyes. "Yeah, he is." She stepped inside, picked him up gently, kissed his forehead like she was trying to memorize the feel of him. "Did he eat okay?" she asked. "Some applesauce and crackers," I said. "And he liked the cartoon with the talking dump truck." She smiled faintly. "That's his favorite." I nodded slowly. "What's his name?" Her hands froze mid-strap as she was tightening the carrier. She said. I said, "What's his name?" She paused, then softly, "His name is Micah." I stared at her, and finally she looked at me. And in that look, I saw the truth. We didn't speak for a long moment. The silence felt like glass between us, thin, breakable, dangerous. Then she said, "Mama, I didn't know how else to tell you." "You could have told me the truth," I said. She closed her eyes. "I found out 4 months ago. A woman reached out to Derek on Instagram, said she had something to tell him. He thought it was a scam until she sent pictures, DNA test, paperwork." "And he admitted it?" I asked, even though I already knew. Simone nodded slowly. "Eventually." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just stepped into the kitchen and turned off the soup that had long gone cold. Simone followed me, her hands wrapped around herself like she was bracing for a storm. "I didn't want to bring you into this," she said, "but the baby's mother, she's sick. In the hospital. No family nearby." She asked for help. "And Derek?" I asked. "Refuses to meet him," she whispered. "Says it's too complicated, that he made one mistake and he's trying to keep this family together." I stared at my daughter, this smart, steady, loving woman I raised, and I saw how heavy she was carrying that man's shame. "Mama," she said, voice trembling now. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't let that baby go into the system. Tears spilled over then, quiet, sincere. I walked over, held her face in my hands like I used to when she was 5 and scraped her knee. "You did the right thing," I said. Then I added softly, "But baby, now we have to do the hard thing." That night, after Simone left with baby Micah, I sat in the living room by myself, didn't turn on the TV, didn't play any music, just sat there, the lights dim, the scent of long, cooled chicken soup still hanging in the air like a question I couldn't answer. My husband, Ellis, was out at his usual Thursday bowling league, or so he said. I stared at the framed photo of us on the wall, taken in Charleston on our 20th wedding anniversary. He had his arm around me. We were both smiling. He looked proud. I looked content. And now, all I could think was, that smile came from a man who had a whole other life. Ellis got home close to 9 p.m. He came in humming, tossing his keys in the tray, setting down the cheap beer he always picked up from the corner store. "Evening, baby," he said like nothing was wrong. I looked up at him from the couch. "How was your game?" He grinned. "Spared in the 10th. We're going to regionals." I nodded slowly. "That's nice." He reached down and kissed my forehead, heading toward the kitchen. "Something smells good. You cook?" "Did," I said. Simone came by. "Dropped off a baby for me to watch." He paused, then said, carefully, "Oh yeah. Which friend's kid was it?" I didn't answer right away. I stood up, walked into the kitchen behind him, watched him take a sip of water like he wasn't gulping down guilt. Then I said, "His name's Micah." The glass stopped at his lips. I watched his jaw tense, just for a second, but I saw it. That flicker, that slip. "And he looks just like you," I added softly. The silence that followed was so sharp it made the kitchen clock sound like thunder. Tick, tick, tick. He didn't deny it. Didn't play dumb. Didn't say who. Didn't ask, "What are you talking about?" He just stood there, and I saw the weight of it all sink into his shoulders, like a coat he'd been wearing for years, finally soaked through with rain. "Ellis," I said, voice shaking now, "how long have you known?" Still, he didn't speak, so I pressed again. "How old is that baby, Ellis?" 15 months? 16? A tear slipped down my cheek. "So you were cheating on me when we went to that marriage retreat. When you sat across from me and said we just needed better communication, you were already living a lie." He exhaled through his nose, sat down at the kitchen table like his legs gave out beneath him. Then finally, he spoke. "I didn't mean for it to happen." I laughed, not out of humor, but the kind of laugh that tastes like blood and regret. "You didn't mean for what to happen?" I said. "The affair? The baby? Or the betrayal of your wife and daughter?" He hung his head. "She was someone I met during those contracts last year. Said she was single. I was lonely. You and Simone were always so busy, wrapped up in the grandkids and church and work." "Oh," I said bitterly, "so we made you cheat." "That's not what I'm saying." "Then say what you mean, Ellis, because I need to hear you say it out loud." He looked up at me then, and for the first time, I didn't recognize his face. "I messed up," he said. "I didn't know about the baby until months after." She reached out. I didn't believe her. Then she sent pictures and a test. I panicked. I figured I'd just send some money and keep it quiet, keep our family intact. I stepped back like he'd slapped me. "Our family?" I said. "You shattered our family the moment you decided your loneliness mattered more than our trust." He started to cry. Quiet, pitiful sobs that would have moved me once. But not now. Now, all I could think about was Simone, about how she'd had to carry his sin, how she'd protected that baby without ever once trying to protect his reputation, how she'd shown more integrity than the man who helped raise her. And that's when something in me broke, not out of anger, but out of clarity. "I want you to leave," I said, voice low and steady. He blinked. "What?" I said, "I want you out of this house. Tonight. You can go stay with whoever helped you destroy this marriage." "She's not," he started. "Don't finish that sentence," I warned. "Don't you dare lie to me again on your way out the door." He stood up, breathing hard. "I'm still Micah's father," he said. I looked him dead in the eye. "Then maybe you should have acted like one." He left 20 minutes later with a duffel bag and a wounded ego. Didn't look back. Didn't apologize again. And just like that, the house was quiet. Too quiet. But I wasn't scared. Because silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it means you're finally at peace. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was crying. Number. I'd already done my weeping. For Simone, for myself, for the little boy whose first home in this world was a secret. What kept me up was the turning in my mind, all those moments I ignored. The sudden phone calls Ellis took in the backyard, the times he came back from work trips with receipts that didn't quite match the dates, the way he pulled away when I asked him if he wanted to go to the children's Easter recital. I'd told myself he was tired, that we were both getting older, but now I saw the truth. He was not tired. He was absent. The next morning, I called Simone. She answered on the second ring, voice quiet. "Hey, Mama." "Baby," I said gently. "I think it's time we talked." Just us. She agreed right away. We met at her place that afternoon. She opened the door with Micah on her hip, still in his little lion onesie, eyes bright and curious. My heart melted all over again. It wasn't that child's fault. None of this was. He didn't ask to be hidden, didn't ask to be born into a mess. He just wanted arms to hold him, a name to answer to, a warm place to sleep. And I was not going to let that child grow up thinking he was someone else's shame. Simone and I sat in her living room. She poured tea. I held Micah while she spoke. "He hasn't changed his mind," she said quietly. "Still won't come see him. Still says it's too complicated. Still thinks this will all blow over." "It won't," I said, "and it shouldn't." She looked up, eyes glassy. "Mama, I'm angry. But I'm also scared. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if Derek's gonna leave. I don't even know if I want him to stay." I nodded slowly. "You don't have to figure all that out today. But what you do need to figure out is what kind of family Micah's gonna have." She let out a breath. "I've thought about it. About guardianship. About maybe even adopting him." I blinked. "You'd do that?" She nodded, voice cracking. "His mama, she's real sick, Mama. And she's scared. She knows Derek wants nothing to do with the baby. She's asked me to take him if she doesn't make it." I swallowed, tight in my throat. "Then that's what we'll do," I said. She looked at me, startled. "We?" she repeated. I took her hand. "Simone, I may be furious with that man you married. But that child, he's ours now, whether his father likes it or not." That week, I made calls. To a family lawyer, to a social worker I knew from my days volunteering, to a pastor friend who knew folks at Child Protective Services, not because I wanted a legal battle, but because I wanted protection for Micah, for Simone, for whatever future God was calling us into. We started the process for temporary guardianship, with Simone listed as the primary and me as secondary. It wasn't easy. Paperwork stacked up like laundry in a teenager's room. But every form we filled out, every signature, every notarized copy, it was one more brick laid in a foundation Micah could someday stand on. Ellis tried calling, twice. I didn't answer. He left one voicemail. It said, "I didn't handle things right." But that boy, he wasn't supposed to become a part of this. "I just want my life back." I deleted it. Because Micah was not a mistake. And Ellis didn't get to rewrite this story just because it got uncomfortable. One evening, I picked Micah up from Simone's and brought him back to my place for the night. I laid him on the same couch where I first saw his little face and thought, something ain't right. Now, everything about him felt right. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "You don't know me yet, baby, but I'm your Nana, and I promise you, I'm gonna love you like you were born right here in this house." He giggled in his sleep, like he believed me. By the time the guardianship paperwork was approved, word had gotten around, not in a dramatic way, just whispers, like wind through the church pews. A glance too long at the grocery store, a quiet pause in the PTA line when someone realized Simone's last name and mine were the same. You could feel it more than you heard it. They didn't ask directly, but people always know when a woman in town carries something heavy and chooses not to drop it. The real test came at Sunday service, the first one after Ellis's absence. He hadn't shown up in 3 weeks, said he was taking space, which I didn't argue. I had nothing left to give him but space, but Simone still sang with the choir, and I still passed the collection plate. And little Micah, now holding himself upright and trying to babble words, sat proudly in my lap while Reverend Thompson preached about truth, consequence, and grace. At the end of service, as people filtered out, 2 women stopped me by the exit. One of them, Ms. Darnell, who ran the prayer circle, gently laid her hand on my arm. "Mrs. Walker," she said, "we've been praying for your family." Just so you know, I looked at her, then down at Micah, nestled in the crook of my arm, soft curls damp with heat, and I said, steady as anything, "Thank you. We're doing all right. The truth's hard sometimes, but it never breaks you unless you try to bury it." She nodded slowly, didn't press further, didn't need to. Ellis's brother called a few days later, said Ellis was staying at his place, hadn't been sleeping, hadn't been eating much either. He says he wants to make it right, he told me. I said nothing for a moment, then he should start by showing up for the child who carries his blood. "He's scared," his brother said, "ashamed." "Well, shame is the right feeling to have," I said gently, "but you don't get points for feeling bad about sin. You get points for making it right." He didn't argue, just said, "Understood." A week later, I opened my door and found Ellis standing there, hat in hand, eyes red. He didn't try to come in, just looked at me like a man who'd read the wrong map and ended up in the wilderness. "May I see him?" he asked. I stared at him for a long time and then stepped aside. Micah was in the living room, tugging at a stacking ring toy. Ellis walked in slowly, crouched low, and looked at him. Micah stared back for a moment, then, without hesitation, waddled over and touched his face. Ellis broke down, not loud, just quiet tears, right there on my hardwood floor. "I wasn't ready," he whispered, "but I'm here now." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to, because repentance isn't about words. It's about standing where you failed and not running. Things didn't go back to normal, but they did go forward. And sometimes, that's even better. Simone filed for a legal separation from Derek 2 weeks after Ellis came to visit, not out of spite, not to punish him, but because, as she put it, "I need to raise these babies in a home that's honest." And that man can't even say Micah's name without wincing. She gave him a chance, told him, "You can still be his father." But I won't pretend like nothing happened. He didn't fight her, didn't apologize much either, just slipped out of the marriage like it was a coat that didn't fit anymore. That was its own kind of clarity. Ellis started showing up more, not to talk to me. I wasn't ready for that, but to visit Micah, always in the daytime, always respectful, brought diapers, juice boxes, little board books with bears and trucks and animals that made sounds when you pressed the buttons. He sat on the floor, cross-legged, reading out loud in that deep voice that used to sing lullabies to Simone when she was sick. And I watched them from the kitchen, a man trying to learn love with his hands now that his words had lost their shine. He never asked to come back. He knew better than that. Simone grew stronger, too. She joined a single moms group, started taking night classes online to finish her business degree. And Micah? He flourished. He learned to walk in my living room, said Nana before he said Daddy, took his first steps between my arms and Simone's. The whole house changed shape around him. Baby gates, soft corners, toys that sang songs I still can't get out of my head. And somehow, even in all that mess, there was peace. One afternoon, while I was folding laundry, Simone came into the room holding Micah on her hip. "Mama," she said, "I just wanted to say thank you." I looked up. For what? For not blaming me. For standing with me. For loving him, I smiled. "Baby," I said, "the day I held you in the hospital for the first time, I made a vow that I'd protect whatever came from you, whatever needed you. That baby may not have grown under your heart, but he's been carried by your love." She cried a little then. So did I. But they were the good kind of tears. the ones that wash away what bitterness leaves behind. People talk about forgiveness like it's something big and loud, a speech, a Sunday altar call, a dramatic moment in a kitchen with tears and promises. But for me, forgiveness came in tiny pieces. It came when Ellis showed up on time, when he didn't make excuses, when he kissed Micah's forehead and didn't rush out the door. I still didn't take him back, and maybe I never will. But I did forgive him, because bitterness is a fire that only burns the hand that holds it. And I've got grandbabies to hold now. You know, life has a way of handing you things you didn't ask for. Sometimes it's a blessing in disguise. Other times, it's a secret wrapped in silence. With your husband's eyes and a child's innocence staring back at you. And in those moments, when the truth knocks the wind out of you, when the family you built starts to show cracks you didn't see coming, you have two choices. You can break, or you can bend and become something stronger, something truer. I didn't ask to raise another baby. I didn't ask for betrayal or secrets or long nights asking God how we got here. But what I did choose, what I will always choose, is love. Love that's steady. Love that protects. Love that says, you are not a mistake. Because babies don't carry blame. They carry hope. And sometimes, y'all, that's what heals a broken house faster than any apology ever could. So let me ask you something. If a child showed up on your doorstep carrying your husband's secret, would you slam the door shut, or would you open your arms and rewrite the ending? Let me know in the comments. And if this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, go on and subscribe. Because these stories, they're not just stories. They're truth wrapped in testimony. And baby, somewhere out there, somebody's waiting to know they're not alone.